Get rid of share. You get success, you get 10 to 1. So I used to pick Johnny Pesky, Bobby Dorr, and Dom DiMaggio.
Oh, wow.
You know, they each had to get 2 hits apiece in a game. You understand? They were very good.
What was the year?
Probably in the late 40s, sure. Yeah. Johnny Pesky, Bobby Dorr was the second baseman, Dom DiMaggio was the center fielder.
Right. Williams and Dorr. Who was
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos, thank you for coming.
Well, Vince DiMaggio played Pittsburgh, he was the right fielder.
I don't do baseball.
I got that straight.
That's good.
But I have, speaking of baseball, and the only thing I can say about baseball is that in my office I have, I think it was sold by the neighborhood a number of years ago. It was a collection of baseball cards going all the way back to the beginning. The first Jewish baseball player was Lipman Pike. Lipman Pike, okay? And they're not sure if he was Jewish or not, but they've got his stats. Now, I really tried, I really did. My old man set me up with various pillows when I was an infant and had me watch a Yankees game, but I think he was reading the New York Times at the time, so I really never got into sports. But in 1959, I was 7, and I was blowing my allowance on baseball cards. Teddy Gottlieb, who was an only child and his parents spoiled him, he also ate paste. Remember eating the paste and the glue and the chalk?
Sure.
That was what Teddy did. But his folks were fairly wealthy, and they gave him $2. Can you imagine? $2. $2, and he bought an entire box of baseball cards, and he wound up with several Roger Marises, a couple of Mickey Mantles. I got, you know what I got? I got 2 Fay Throneberries and 1 Marv Throneberry. Later on, they traded. Later, they traded Marv Throneberry to the Mets back in 1969. Toby, do I have to put you in the corner?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. They traded him to the Mets. The Mets in 1969, did they win anything, or were they still losing?
That was their magical year.
That was okay, let's go back a ways. Let's go back to the 60s. And what happened was, the Mets were doing so badly, and their manager was Casey Stengel, the old professor, and he was the one who asked the famous, "Can't anybody here play this game?"
Right.
And I've used that line several times in Temple life, because sometimes you go that way. But that was my experience with baseball, for better or worse. In the summer of 1968, I was stuck in New York for scholastic reasons we won't talk about, and I missed out on being a waiter at summer camp, which was the creme de la creme. But instead, I wound up taking typing lessons on 59th Street, and I had to take the subway back and forth. I was reading Taipan by James Clavell, one of those big, thick books. And I actually finished the blessed thing. I can't remember a thing about it now. But what happened was, my mother says to me one day, she says, "I want you to take Steven Zorowitz to a baseball game." And I said, "What is Steven Zorowitz to me, or I to him?" He was the son of Mrs. Zorowitz, who was my 6th grade teacher, and who concluded absolutely that I have no mathematical sense whatsoever. So it was a Mets-Phillies doubleheader. Now, who do you think was going to win that in 1968? The Phillies. But in New York City, if you cheer for any team but the Mets or the Yankees, they will kill you. It's very simple. So we went off. My mother made us 2 bologna sandwiches each, because it's a doubleheader, and 1 bologna sandwich simply will not make it. And we were going to be outdoors, so the bologna breath wouldn't matter to anybody. And we sat there dutifully and watched the game. It was boring. It was so boring. I know some people like watching baseball. I've watched paint dry, and it's better. Anyway, what happened was, we finished the bologna sandwiches, was surrounded by happy Gentiles drinking beer and eating treif, neither of which could we do. And a man came along selling blue, plastic, long trumpets. Because you, at the game, you need, if you're bored, you do charge, charge. So I bought one of those, I think it was 50 cents, and I taught myself to blow it. And as a result, years later, I taught myself to blow shofar. It is the same thing. Blowing shofar is not blowing. Blowing shofar, pardon me, is spitting. You just put them up, and you get a sound. And that was
The
baseball.
question, I suppose, is do
Yes.
you still yell charge after tequila?
Yes, constantly. And one each after Shavarim. Okay.
And I have a question. How
Yes.
did that glue eating thing work out for your
It
friend?
wasn't me, it was
For
Teddy.
your friend?
He's probably a lawyer.
Oh.
There's something about eating glue and paste
Oh
and
my God.
chalk. And I want you to know, we
Is that
went
a
to.
combination?
No, you eat them one at a time. You start with the glue, you move on to the chalk and so
There
on.
were different
We
glues.
no, this was
The white
Elvis.
glue?
No, this was the gloppy stuff that was brown and came out
Oh,
of the
yes,
big jar.
spongy thing.
Yes, and then there was Elmer's glue, which was white, Elmer's paste. We had green boards, we didn't have black boards.
Oh, yeah.
And those were the years of the Cold War, and many of you may well remember, you're sitting there minding your business, and all of a sudden Mrs. Maevsky goes, duck and cover. So we all dove under our desks, because it is well known that a 1/4 inch of Formica will protect you from nuclear holocaust. Because we were on the Lower East Side, and they were going to drop the big one right on the Empire State, so obviously we were going to get the shock waves.
No, you were far away, that's fine.
Well, for a Soviet bomb, whatever it was. No, it's amazing. I miss those days. I would rather live in risk of World War III than the current political situation. But let that go. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture gave out very large cans of peanut butter. Okay, you know, like Maxwell House coffee cans. And you wondered why it was only smooth. Uncle Sam will not give you chunky peanut butter. I do not know why, because I like chunky better. It turns out they wanted you to take it into your fallout shelter so that you could spend 15, 20 years waiting for the radioactivity to go away. In the meantime, you could eat peanut butter. They didn't want you eating your neighbors. So we said, oh my goodness, look at this, it's free.
It's a protein, so.
Yes, and very good for a crisis. All right, let me tell you about Pekudei. Pekudei is the Torah reading, and frankly, this is the part of Exodus, Shemot, where things really, really settle down. They get very dull. You're reading instructions, what you should build. They count all the gold, silver, and copper. They make the 8 priestly garments, and I looked into that. I Googled that. The garments of the high priest, they exist again today. According to Ynet, the Jewish World, which is very right-wing, slightly to the left of Attila the Hun, and they are predicting that Messiah will come. Of course, they're going to have to do something with the Mosque of the Dome of the Rock. What can I tell you? See, my naive, idealistic thought is, if Messiah is as smart as his publicity gives out, he or she or they ought to be able to incorporate the Dome of the Rock into the 3rd temple. Thoughts?
Why not?
Everybody agrees with me?
Why not?
That very rarely happens in a synagogue. Is it okay? Nobody radical? But I saw here, according to Ynet, the Jewish World, that they have indeed sat down and made the big day kahuna. That is the clothing of the big kahuna. That is the clothing of the high priest. And I have a picture here. There's a model of the temple at the Israel Museum, actual size, it's wonderful. And this is a picture of the clothing of the high priest, except they used a sewing machine. Okay, you be the rabbi. Are priestly garments kosher if they are made with a sewing machine?
As long as it's not.
That was just not on job.
Because they didn't have sewing machines in the days of Moses.
So they can't say they weren't kosher then.
But you're supposed to sit there and sew. I don't do sewing
But
myself.
if you're using metal,
Sorry, what?
if you're using anything made of metal, that
That's a
would
good
be
question.
regarding wars.
That's a
so,
good question. These guys are extremely right-wing. I'm sure they have rabbis advising them. They've got the clothing of the high priest. I think you can send them to the gift shop and get a set of it for yourself to wear at parties and religious occasions.
yeah.
I don't know what they plan to do with it.
Are they unisex?
They cannot be unisex. It's a man's world.
Then I can't go to that party.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
There's men, Toby.
You know, you could put in for that. You could put in, I could just see that. The Reform have a woman high priest, the Orthodox have a male high priest, and the Conservatives say, why don't you get back to us? We're not really sure. We gotta wait 10 years. Okay? So I looked into this whole thing with when the temple was destroyed. It's all right, you didn't do it. It was the year 70, it was the Romans. Okay? And the fact is the entire temple complex had been enlarged by everybody's favorite paranoid, Herod the Great. You know Herod?
Sure.
A tall guy, short guy, whatever he was, with his wife Miriam. He was so in love with Miriam, and then one day he figured she must be committing adultery on him, so he murdered her with a knife.
That's nice.
Herod was insane. What?
How did he get that on tape?
He was insane.
Oh, okay.
He was beyond help. But he got along with the Romans. Good Shabbos. Do you get along with Romans?
Sure.
Only the Jews.
Okay. All right.
Jewish Romans. And
The Romans gave him permission to be the ethnarch. Do you know what an ethnarch is? He's head of an ethnicity. He was in charge, allegedly, of all the Jews in the world. But he was so paranoid, he had sons that he loved, he had daughters that he loved, and one day in a fit of rage, he murdered them all. And Augustus, Caesar Augustus, you know, he was the adopted son of Julius, said, I would rather be Herod's pig than his relative. Why would he say that?
because
He wouldn't eat
doesn't
the pig.
slaughter.
He wouldn't eat the pig. He wouldn't slaughter the pig, but apparently he had a problem with human relatives. Okay? And eventually he does build this enormous temple. It's really lovely. Probably that's why the walls are standing today. There is a western wall, and you may not know there's an eastern wall as well. Have you seen the eastern wall? The eastern wall gets hardly ever the publicity that the western wall gets. The eastern wall was incorporated into the city wall by the Turks. Okay? But it is visible. I took a picture of it years ago.
And what is the actual western wall? We had this conversation.
Yes.
Because it's not what we all thought was the remaining wall from
No,
the
it's an
temple that's
it's an outer wall.
Okay.
What I have at home, Sherry, is I have a little model of the temple. It's only about 6 inches by 3 inches, and you open up the roof and you twist the little key, and it plays the Hatikva. Now, why is that wrong?
Because there wasn't yet, there was the.
That's correct, yes.
Right.
What else? What other reason? No?
It didn't exist yet.
Right. The other reason is because clearly the Hatikva is a left-wing political anthem. And the guys who are planning on rebuilding the temple with Shabbos are extremely right-wing. Okay? So anyway, oh, here we go. He was a madman who murdered his own family. He murdered rabbis. This is Herod. Let's see. Now, the Romans, for the most part, got along with the Jews because the Romans had a live and let live policy as far as religion was concerned. The Romans themselves were very practical. They had to have gods that you could see. And in so doing, they stole all the gods from the Greeks. They didn't make up anything themselves. They just changed the name. Zeus became Jove. What's her name? Hera became Juno. And you can visit them a little ways up 95. Okay? You'll notice that Juno is underneath, what's the other one? Jupiter. Jupiter is another name for him. Okay? It's like George and Martha with the GW Bridge. Okay, so the Romans insisted that in addition to making a sacrifice for the health of the emperor, that the Jews should pay a special tax known as the Fiscus Judaicus. And it was such a good idea to tax the Jews only, it was a horrible idea, that they continued it during the Middle Ages. See? It was like institutionalized anti-Semitism. Let's see, Herod, he built an enormous platform, a platform in front of the building, because he wanted all the Jews from abroad, because the majority of Jews is not living in Israel. They are living in Babylonia. He wants them to come on holidays, and what happens when people visit you on holidays who are not related to you? They bring their... Exactly. So this was a major source of income for Herod's particular Mishigasim. Of course, we all know, come on, quick, what's Herod's winter palace? Masada, that's right, Masada. Okay? I told you I climbed it twice with my friend Mark Grossman. We didn't get along. We were roommates the third year in Israel. He was impossible. He put together little plastic models of the various planes in the Israeli and Arab air forces. And when we got to Masada, he didn't have a canteen, but he did have an empty plastic kaopectate bottle. So he rinsed that out really well, and he filled it up with water, and then we start climbing the snake path.
Oh my gosh.
Have you been up the snake path? The thing with the snake path is you cannot tell how much farther you have to go. Maybe they designed it that way, I don't know. I'm schlepping along and saying, why am I doing this twice? I did this already once, I don't need this. And it was too early for the Rakevel, which was the cable car. That didn't open until 10 a.m. And in order to climb the rock, you got to get up like 3 in the morning. Because once the sun comes up, you can fry an egg on that rock. Okay, so Mark stops every few minutes and takes a swig of water from his kaopectate bottle. And finally, somebody nudges him and says, Mark, I'm so sorry for you. He says, why are you sorry for me? He says, you must have it really bad. But that was Herod's winter palace because it was supposedly impenetrable. And it really was a wonderful fortress. Again, don't forget, the guy is paranoid. Let's see, what else? Oh, he was in charge of the garments of the high priest. And the high priest had to be a Sadducee, because the Sadducees, the aristocrats, who didn't know bupkis about Torah, but they knew they had to put on the dog for Herod. So, and I think I told you this story. It's Sukkot, and one of the boys, who's a Sadducee, is running the service. And of course, generally, if you're a rabbi and you make a mistake, in this shul at least, we have somebody who comes up and whispers in my ear. Okay, and thank God after 30 years I'm not making nearly as many mistakes as I did at the beginning. We'll talk later. Okay, but in this particular temple service, what happens is that he makes a mistake during the Sukkot service, and the people who are attending, who are all Pharisees, who hate him anyway, throw their etrogim at him. Okay? Now, I don't know if you've ever been hit by a flying lemon, but it really stings. Okay? That happened to me once in my first congregation. It was during Sukkot, and I said instead of or, and they threw their etrogim at me.
No, sir, really?
All right. These things are known to happen. Anyway, you'll notice that in the Torah they're talking about the portable sanctuary. What I was telling you about was the permanent one. And the fact that the temple was so well built, that's probably why we have the Western Wall. That Western Wall has been through shot and shell, with all due respect to the Arabs. Prior to the war period, when the Jordanians owned the wall, they piled garbage on it. Mm-hmm. And when the ultra-religious would come, they would sneak in to stand there and daven. They would throw garbage on their heads. And it was against the law to blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah at the wall. And that is why, in 1967, when that section of Jerusalem was conquered by the Israeli army, you could say liberated if you want, they made a point, the Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who at the time was let him rest in peace, who at the time was the chief army chaplain, he made a point of blowing shofar. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge being Jewish. I mean, we have this history, most of which is very negative. But if you can read that, if you can face all that, if you can absorb that and still go on being Jewish, I salute you. I've been a Jew all my life, and I do enjoy it. But it's amazing how many different varieties of people have tried to get, to hurt us. And we're still here. We survive. That's what Jews do. We survive. We don't survive like a paramecium or an amoeba. We survive creatively. Okay? Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos. Thank you so much. And Babylonian exile.
The cantor.
What the book? Yeah.
The cantor, the cantor.
I'm missing a canto.
You have to park somewhere else.
Read is different.
I know.
Are you gonna take over, Paul?
Am I gonna what?
Are you taking over here?
No.
He did at the Minion on Thursday, and he did it very, because the cantor was late, and
We
he
lost
did a
both
very
the
good
cantor and the
job.
rabbi.
He did a very good job.
That was okay. The building wasn't hit.
Oh.
No.
Generally, I speak for a half hour.
Well, what happened?
I don't know.
Today's,
It's a wonderful half hour.
It's,
Thank you.
Go so fast.
Thank you, that's very kind.
Especially tonight.
All right,
Muy bien, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Today we have a guest. To be a little bit more accurate, everybody is a guest in Shabbat. We are coming for Shabbat, so we are like guests and we are like hosts at the same time. But we have a guest from New Hampshire. They are in the cold, yes, where the wind froze everything, freeze everything. Her name is Rachel Spirer, and she's with her husband, and there he is.
that's how I'm known.
Mel, okay. And it happens to be that a week ago, when I was singing, I was hearing a very nice and tuned voice. You see, from here and from there, you have a radar and you can pick some things. Somebody who fell asleep, yes, isn't it, Rabbi?
What is that? Somebody
who maybe will, it's like,
Oh, yes,
sleeping.
yes.
You can see everything. You can see everything, and you see, and you listen, and you hear when somebody has a nice voice, and then I approach to her and I say, well, it will be very nice if you can sing with me one service. And then she says, well, I will love it, but it has to be next Friday because then the other week I am going back to the cold weather. So here she is, so please. Rachel. You take the mic. So we are going to start just singing the Shalom Aleichem, and then we are going to lead the candles. Okay? So first Shalom Aleichem on page number 13.
Shalom Aleichem,
Malachei Hashalem, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Amnachim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei
Yes, light the candles and then we'll do your Yid Nefesh. Laura, would you honor us by lighting the candles, please? Ladies, if you'll proceed over this direction.
You know, this is international ladies.
Yes, I know. I don't know if I never heard of such a thing, but I know.
I think it's great. Yeah. Oh, it's live, we're live streaming it.
Okay, you can approach
Yeah,
to the
absolutely,
light.
yeah. Go into the
I
website,
wish for a new box of
the
matches.
temple or something.
Strike, as my mother would say, that striker has lost its girlish mind.
But I got it. Fulfill.
Sorry,
That's a
what?
wish that can be fulfilled.
Yeah.
It's the first time I got it.
Oh, it's beautiful. We wave our hands over the candles, we cover our eyes, and sing the blessing.
You and I.
Elohim
Vitzivanu, vitzivanu, lehadlik ner. Vitzivanu, vitzivanu, lehadlik ner.
Vitzivanu, vitzivanu, lehadlik ner. Amen.
All right, turn to the person next to you, wish them good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. It's nice to see you again. Thank you.
What are you doing to celebrate International Women's Day?
I showed up at Temple tonight.
Good Shabbos. Thank you for participating. We have a chance next Shabbat to
Well, you know the match.
All right, let's come here.
Okay, let's all greet each other. Good Shabbos.
Muy bien, you may be seated.
Just say hi.
Shabbat shalom.
Good job.
Good Shabbos. We are all together.
Shabbos, good Shabbos.
On
My
page.
favorite one of the I had such a fabulous day because of you.
We are all together on page number 14, Yedid Nefesh.
To the Lachazer V, which is on page 21.
Shabbat lechu elecha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, sof la'aseh b'Shabbat tfilah. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat lekavela. Lecha dodi lekrat kala.
Please rise, face the door.
לחדותי לקראת כלה, פני שבת לקראת. You go with me. No, okay. Okay, you go with me, you don't. Okay, 1, 2, 3. לך, דודי, לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת לקבלה. לך, דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת לקבלה. מזמור שיר.
23.
1, 2, 3.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, להניף בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי אסון, עלי גבל, עלי היגיון מכינות. Everybody, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מגד לו בשמך אדוני, בעוד עמקו מחשבו מחשבך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך
Very nice. The Baruch Hu is on page 28. Oh, we're doing Tzaddik? No, we're doing the Baruch Hu, yes.
No, no.
You want to do the Tzaddik? Or do you want to do the Tzaddik with the...
Let's do the Tzaddik Kataman.
Okay,
That is
That's
very,
his choice.
in honor of Lewandowski.
oh, yeah.
In honor of Lewandowski, we are going to do the Tzaddik Kataman.
Lewandowski is a classical chassid.
Lewandowski was a composer.
Yeah,
Was a
yes.
composer of Jewish ritual music for Jewish music for Kabbalat Shabbat and for the rest of the service and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Tzaddik Kataman Yifrach Ke'eretz Pompano Yizkeh Shetu Uleita Temet Adonai Yafrichu Onyenu V'Sema V'Shelim V'Hananim Yehu Le'Hananim Ki Yashar Adonai V'lo Avlataro.
Anything else? Baruch Hu.
28.
Yes, page 28, we bow towards the ark.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Please be seated.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המוריד והרבים.
29.
אהבת
עולם בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, קיום משפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, שכבנו וקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו,
אוהב עמו ישראל.
Page 30, we have the Shema. Cover your eyes to show God cannot be seen. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Uncover your eyes. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Amen. Reading in the English. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words which I command you this day you shall take to heart. Teach them diligently to your children, and recite them at home and away, night and day, behind as a sign upon your hand, and as a reminder above your eyes. Inscribe them upon the doorposts of your homes and upon your gates. Reading silently all the way to the end of the TC paragraph on 31.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Right, middle of 30. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Adonai Elohechem, amen.
Amen.
32.
In the middle of the page.
Yes.
ומלכותו ורצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל וחרו שירה ושמחה רבה ויעברו כולם ממך באים אדוני ממך נדבר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה
מלכותך ראו בניך, חוקי הים לפני משה, זה לי ענו ויאמרו,
אדוני ימלוך לעולם הבאים.
ונאמר, כי כבד אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהי ישראל.
On 33, as is customary, we'll read the top left-hand paragraph after we go around, and if there's somebody you know, friend, relative, Jew, Gentile, anyone at all, in need of refuah shalema, quick and speedy recovery, please include their name. Ann Beth and I did a service at John Knox Village earlier this evening, and we saw Alice Braun Prestia, who is a member of this congregation for many years. I don't know if you're attentive to this. During the high holy days when services tend to go on, people look around. This is a lady who's always dressed very elegantly, in particular a talit that was made for her by her father, let him rest in peace. And it's got sparkly things on it and different colors, it's multicolored crystals. And anyway, if anyone is able to visit her, she's in rehab at John Knox. Before Shalema to her. Yes. Okay, going round. Yes. I'm sorry, before Shalema. Yes.
Randy Greason,
Before Shalema.
Nancy Austin, Todd Austin, Lauren Maurer, Lisi Shapiro.
Before Shalema.
Jean Myers.
Before Shalema.
Jerry Rice.
Before Shalema. Okay. Yes.
Michelle Drago.
Before Shalema.
Joel Kuznets.
Before Shalema. Before Shalema. Yes.
Lenny Seelig.
Before Shalema.
Pearl Katz, Marsha Goodhart.
Before Shalema.
Bruce Martin, Kenny
Bush.
Mahadeo.
Before Shalema.
Malcolm Black,
Before
Stuart
Shalema.
Epstein,
Before Shalema.
Joel Shankman,
Before Shalema.
David Weinreb,
Before Shalema.
Morty Fogel,
Before Shalema.
Bart Dozer.
Before Shalema. Okay.
And just to let you know, Stuart Epstein's having surgery
Right.
tomorrow.
Oh, it is tomorrow?
7:30 in the morning.
Ah, okay. Before Shalema to him.
Adele Greenblatt.
Before Shalema. In Stuart's case, it is back surgery. I spoke with him earlier this week, and he's been a great friend to this congregation as well as a member. So, obviously, we do pray for his Refuah Shalema. Yes.
Brian Binning.
Refuah Shalema.
And Barbara Shapiro.
Refuah Shalema. Oh, yes. All right, let's read the English paragraph, top left. Help us together. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again, our sovereign to life. Spread over us your shelter of peace. Guide us with your good counsel. Save us because of your mercy. Shield us from enemies and pestilence, from starvation, sword, and sorrow. Remove the evil forces that surround us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, O God, who watches over us and delivers us, our gracious and merciful ruler. Guard our coming and our going. Grant us life and peace now and always. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Praise you, Adonai, spreads the shelter of peace over us, over all his people Israel, over Jerusalem and the entire world. Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha, baruch atah Adonai, aporei sukkot shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim, v'al kol ha'olam kulo. Amen. 34, the Vishamru. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Masot et ha-Shabbat, V'dorot ha'berit olam. Vishamru
Shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasot et HaShabbat L'dorotam berit olam.
K'sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasot et HaShabbat L'dorotam berit olam.
Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat Lasot et HaShabbat L'dorotam berit olam.
Please rise, Yashikach, half Kaddish, bottom of 34.
Yikadal v'yikadash shemei tavo.
Amen.
Yomar divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei.
V'chayechon yomechon u'vayetecho et Yisrael. Bagala, bagala, u'bizman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach, yom yom yomaya yitbarach.
Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalol shemei dekudasha leila min kol birchata v'shirata.
Tushbechata v'nechemata tamiran b'rama v'yimeru amen.
All right, the Amidah, silent standing prayer 35b, concluding on 38. As always, you can do the whole thing, or you can focus on a couple of lines. When you're finished, you may be seated.
Shalom B'Roma. Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Imru, amen. Oseh Shalom B'Roma. כל ישראל, יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Viru.
Page 47. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
ויחולו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם. ויכל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה. וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים, אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והאדוני, האל עליון, כונג שמיים וארץ. מאמין אבו בדברו, מקיים מתים במאמרו, האל הקדוש שאין כמוהו, המניח לעמו ביום שבת קודשו, כי כבר רצה להניח להם, כי כבר רצה להניח להם, פניו נעמוד וירא ופחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד, מהן הברכות. אל ההודעות, אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומאריך שביעי, ומניח מקדושה לעמד ושני עונג, סקס למעשה, למעשה
On page 48. Not really, okay.
אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו, רצה ממנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך ודרך חלקנו בתורתך, סבנו בטובך ושמחנו ישועתך, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך, 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 לעבדך באמת, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך, 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 לעבדך באמת, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך, 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 לעבדך באמת, ותאר ליבנו לעבדך, 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 לעבדך באמת. ויאכילנו אדוני אלוהינו ואהבה ורצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך, ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen. Got a full Kaddish here, signifying the conclusion of the Myra of the evening service.
Yikadav Yikadashim Merabah V'yomadi Brachi V'tei V'yamlich Machutei V'chayechon V'yomechon V'chayechecha Beit Yisrael V'agalog B'zman Karibim Ru Amen Yehesh Merabah V'vorah V'yolam V'yomei Amaya Yitvarach Yitvarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yitajar V'yitalev V'yitalal Shemei Dekudashav Amin Kol Birchata V'shirata Tishvachata V'nechemata Damiran B'yom Avim Amen Tikava Teloton Uvoton Dechol Yisrael Kodom Avuhon Divishmaya V'imru Amen Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Oleinu V'yokol Yisrael V'imru Amen Oseh Shalom Yiromah Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'yokol Yisrael Yalkol Yoshei Tevel V'yimru
Page 49 is the Kiddush. We'll wait until the Kiddush Macharot for the chance to distribute the wine. Well, if you got Macharim, you got Macharot.
Todavía no se puede, hay que cantar majorenses.
Not Macharim. Macharim is, thank you. Macharim is, big shots. Machar literally from the Yiddish, from the German, a maker. Someone who thinks they're doing something.
Wine. Rejection, I'm rejection.
He's a maker of
The alcoholics hang out.
I'm the juice girl, yes. Juice?
Who's juice?
Juice.
Thank you.
I'm standing right for you.
That's all right.
Juice or wine? Juice? Juice? Any juice back here?
About wine.
Are we ready? One, two, three.
Shabbat Kodsho V'Yahava V'Ratzon Hinchilanu Zikaron Ma'aseh Bereishit Hunam Tehillah L'Mikrei Kodesh Sefer Yetziat Mitzrayim Kilanu V'Charta Tanu Kidashta Mikavori Shabbat Kosheka V'Yavahu Ratzon Inkatanu Baruch Atah Adonai L'Kadesh Shabbat.
Okay.
Rico? Yeah, yummy?
All right. Now later we'll get somebody from somebody who understands the intricacies of our particular art. Somebody like Sherry, I'll borrow intricacies. You want that you can't just have an art. You have to have
Problem again today. Finally, he's finally impressed. I yelled at him again today. He said, "This is ridiculous. What's going on? Somebody's going up here. Now things are getting out of hand." Heart rate shot up again, so they're trying something else. He's still in ICU. He's not here.
At least he's reacting normally, which would mean to be there under pressure.
The doctor I worked for, she said that it's a good sign that he's doing this.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would think so.
Okay, I'm sorry, we were schmoozing.
Just get going with it. It's all right. We'll see it for next
I
time.
apologize for the absence of a curtain. It wasn't me. All right, page 51 is the Aleinu. All right, the ark is closed as best it can be, and I want to thank Paul and Sherry for doing yeoman's work. All right, if you're not doing Mourner's Kaddish, you may be seated. Page 52 is Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, Yalma divrach yamutei, Yamlich machutei, V'chayechon v'mechon, V'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, V'agalau v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach, Li'olam u'le'ol mayah. Yitborach, Yishtabach, Yitpo'ar, Yitromam, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha, B'rechu, V'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechamata, Tamiran bi'alma v'imru, Amen. Yehei Shalom Rabba min Shemaya, V'chayim aleinu v'yom, Kol Yisrael v'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Uyaseh Shalom, aleinu v'yom, Kol Yisrael, Amen. Please be seated. We'll hear a few words from our wonderful temple president. The microphone just went out again. Also, I want to thank Doreen for taping us and putting us online, even though week after week after week, I keep seeing myself on December 24th.
The other ones I added.
I know what happens. And there's nothing so final.
It's your Christmas present.
Nothing so final as watching a congregant wind up the wires when you're davening. So,
Pick it on me.
Is this working? No.
Just talk loud.
Talk loud. I can do that. Good Shabbos, everyone. Well, all my heroes are here tonight. Rachel, whose voice now I know where Sarah gets her voice, her beautiful voice from. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful addition to our Shabbat service. For my hero, who's been temple president for 34 years. What can I say? You have my admiration.
Get a couple more to go around.
It's just lovely to have you here. Actually, we go to the same ophthalmologist, so we see each other. And for Galia and Dina to be here is a total joy, And Donna too. Welcome everyone. I have a lot of exciting things to tell you, so I'll go quickly. You know our regular schedule during the week, and tomorrow after services, Rabbi's class.
Yeah, by request, okay, and they know who they are. Jewish gangsters. Huh.
Oh.
Lepke, Louie, and Jip the Blood.
Oh. Okay, let's not miss that one.
No.
There's a penalty involved, right? You don't go for Jewish gangsters, right? Right. And on Thursday, after Minyan, Cantor Javier's class is still going to be, we're still diving.
We are still diving.
We're diving
We didn't find the
through the
treasure yet.
Siddur. So flippers, oxygen tanks, come. But don't miss it. And come for the morning minyan, Mondays and Thursdays at 8:45. Mondays at 10 o'clock after minyan, come to Laura's group on aging gracefully. I'm going to be talking to you about something exploring, and it'll be a couple of weeks till we get to talk about it, but it has to do with how healthy it is to volunteer. We are all a team of volunteers, but as of late, I found out the tremendous health benefits of the challenge of volunteering in new situations. So I will be coming to you in depth about that with the hopes that you'll find something very interesting that you would like to volunteer for at Temple Sholom. Please, please, please call the office. Come for Purim on the 20th. Come for Pesach on April 19th. We're already getting bookings. We want to have a full house for the first Seder, so make sure you're with us. It will be wonderful, but it won't be wonderful without you. So we need you to come. Call the office, make a reservation. For Purim as well, although it is not as it's a joyful, happy holiday, but we're doing pizza and Megillah, so we want to know how many pizzas to order so that everyone has plenty. So please come. But for these events, we really need your support. During the summer, Dr. Murray Lichtenstein is going to be doing a 3-part series on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I can't wait, and everyone I've spoken to can't wait for that because he is extraordinary. And possibly we could have it filmed, and then for our snowbirds who are home and might miss it, then you don't have to miss it because his lectures are just absolutely wonderful. Believe it or not, we're already starting to gear up for the high holidays in thought and in schedule planning for everything we need so that our holidays can be as wonderful, if not more wonderful than last year. And last year they were fantastic. So my love to you all, and so good to spend Shabbat with you.
Let's give a round of applause for a wonderful president.
Another 30 years to go.
When is the time change? Is it this weekend?
We're springing forward this weekend.
This weekend?
Yes.
So it goes with the Saturday service? No, the Saturday.
No, it'll be Saturday night. Saturday night, you lose an hour. something going back to 1930, which ought to be done away with. Okay, I'm really excited. I want to thank Rita about the mention about the volunteer, and also Murray Lichtenstein's PhD lecture. What is his topic again?
The Dead Sea Scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, and I will be happy to see them online December 24th.
Before the Dead Sea resurrects.
All right, I think we're doing Adon Olam.
Again, thank you, Rachel. And we can compromise you, commit you for the next time that you are going to come here. As we say in French, gay gesund und cum gesund.
You're going to say muy bien.
No.
Muy bien is Yiddish too.
Okay.
Page 54 is the Adon Olam.
The moment that everybody is...
I'm sorry, sweetie. The microphone is tight.
It's okay, she doesn't know. 1, 2, 3. Adon Olam asher malach b'tem kol yezir nivra le'nasar b'chesed kol azay melech shema nivra Adon Olam be'acharei iglot hakol ve'vado iglot nora Adon Olam ve'hu haya ve'hu והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם והוא אחד ואין שני להמשילו להגבירה אדון עולם והוא ראשית בלי תכלית ולא עוז ועד משרה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא בקץ הכל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא אדון עולם, והוא אלי, וחי גואלי, בצורכי פרי בארץ צרה אדון עולם, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנפקוסי ביום בקרא אדון עולם, בידו אפקיד רוחי, בעת ישן בעין אדון עולם, באם רוחי גמיעתי, אדון עיני וגולי אדון עולם, אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא בחפץ הכל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא Adon Olam.
Despite the dead battery, Galia has triumphed. Thank you, sweetie. Muy bien. Please rise for the closing benediction. I also want to thank Rachel for participating in the davening as you go off to New Hampshire, where I have lived, give or take, 22 years.
Yes.
Gay Gesund, Kim Gesund, we look forward to seeing you again. Yivarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Yo'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord turn his face into you and grant you peace. We'll say Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat, 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 Shalom.